Hi, Catherine. How are you?
Hi, Erin. Nice to meet you.
You too. Can you confirm for me how to pronounce your last name?
Sure, it's Aydelott.
Aydelott. Okay, I love it. All right. So I'll just take about a minute at the beginning of the session to do a brief introduction, and then I'll turn it over to you.
Sounds great. Thanks for being here. Thanks for helping.
Yeah, of course. Not a problem. Okay. And you're already co-host, so you should be able to share your screen without any issues, and audio sounds great. So I
Great.
think we're just wait until it's time.
Sounds good. Thanks. Been a fun conference. I'm glad you took it in chunks over 3 days. That I thought was very well spaced and planned. Doesn't get too overwhelming.
Anna Maria, you have your hand raised. Do you have a question? I'm giving you the ability to speak if you'd need to ask a question before we start. Okay, that might have just been an error. I'm gonna go ahead and lower your hand.
When have folks
Everyone will
been
get started in about 5 minutes.
been sharing their screen, Erin? Should I do that now?
Whenever you like, yeah, if you want to go ahead and have the intro slide up, that's absolutely fine.
Sure, great. Thanks.
We'll get started in about 2 minutes, everyone. All right, we're at the top of the hour, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Erin Owens, and I'll be the moderator for this session. Before we begin, I have a few reminders. We do have a code of conduct in effect during this conference. There's a link in the chat if you would like to view that code of conduct. And if you experience any concerns regarding conduct during the conference, we ask that you email us at that Gmail address included in the chat. Please be sure your microphone is muted. I think that's automatically done here. During the Q&A, you can raise your hand if you would like to ask a question out loud, and I will unmute you. You may also type your questions in the chat or into the Q&A function. This session is being recorded. You can enable captions by clicking on the Show Captions button at the bottom of the screen. Today's presenter is Katherine Aydelott, an associate professor and arts and humanities librarian at the University of New Hampshire in Durham, New Hampshire. The session is titled, "What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Unveiling Generative AI's Potential in the Humanities." Please join me in welcoming Katherine.
Thank you so much, Erin. Thanks, everybody, for joining me this afternoon. Indeed, I am Katherine Aydelott from the University of New Hampshire, and this is What is it good for? Absolutely nothing. Unveiling Generative AI's Potential in the Humanities. I'll start by giving you an overview of what I'll cover this afternoon. I'm going to briefly introduce myself, the University of New Hampshire, and the UNH Library and my role there. And I'll give you an overview of my generative AI journey, which might be similar or different from yours, provide you some context to how I approach working with AI on campus here. And I do recognize that AI is manifested in a number of different ways, encompassing a number of different tools. I'm going to use AI this afternoon as shorthand for generative AI without talking about the big universe of AI. I will also talk about how I worked to unveil generative AI to faculty in the humanities fields that I serve and the classes that worked with AI last spring semester. That's the semester that just ended. I'll finish up with some tips and reminders, and we can do some Q&A. And I'll note here on this initial slide that mine are generally illustrated with AI-generated art produced by DALL-E, which is part of ChatGPT. The exception being this photograph of Diamond Library, the main library on the University of New Hampshire campus where I work. So the University of New Hampshire is a flagship public R1 land, sea, and space grant institution on the New Hampshire seacoast in Durham. We have about 12,000 undergraduate students and about 2,500 graduate students. So we're small to medium-sized for a land-grant university. The library is supported by 30 staff members, and we have 13 librarians with faculty status. And that number is split as evenly as you can get an odd number. 6 of us are subject specialists or liaisons to the 5 colleges on campus. So we have a single librarian for each of the following colleges: Paul College of Business and Economics, College of Life Sciences and Agriculture, College of Health and Human Services, and College of Engineering and Physical Sciences. We have 2 librarians that support the College of Liberal Arts. We have a social science, government information and public policy librarian, and I serve the arts and humanities disciplines. And then 7 of our faculty librarians serve as functional librarians that serve the campus or the library more broadly, such as our discovery librarian. We have a scholarly communications librarian, a research data services librarian, collection strategist, an archivist, and our head of special collections. So that might give you a sense of our size and our staffing without getting into some of our budget challenges. As the Arts and Humanities librarian, I cover the full range of these disciplines across campus. So that's art and art history, classics, humanities, and Italian studies, English and journalism, history, the languages, literatures, and cultures, music, philosophy, theater and dance, and women's and gender studies. And I'm going to append to this genealogy. I include genealogy as a special focus of mine that plays a role in my AI journey, which I'll be talking about next. So I had been following AI development since around ChatGPT's first public release when it got big in November of 2022, and continued my interest through attending several AI-centric sessions at the WILU conference. That's the Workshop in Information Use Conference in Montreal last spring. In the summer and fall of this past year, I was on sabbatical, and my sabbatical project was genealogy focused, but I continued to follow AI developments in academia and on campus during that time. In terms of genealogy, that's a field that has embraced generative AI as potentially revolutionizing what can be done with texts in the context of genealogical research. And when I returned to campus in January of 2024, I took Steve Little's courses that are called Empowering Genealogists with AI, which he offers through the National Genealogical Society. Now, I note that the course is on empowering genealogists with AI. It's about AI. It's not about genealogy itself. So the courses did allow me to experiment with a variety of generative AI tools. We were asked to use ChatGPT, the paid version, for class. So it had been ChatGPT 4, and now it's ChatGPT 4.0, which I continue to pay $20 a month for. And we were using this tool quite extensively, including some of the back-end settings. So we were including some of the custom instructions for how we wanted the bot to behave and respond. We were developing task-oriented GPTs for streamlining some specific genealogical tasks. But we were also encouraged to experiment with other AI tools, including Anthropic's Claude and Google's Gemini. We looked at Poe, which is a tool that allows users to try and compare several AI tools from one interface. And I've been using Perplexity AI on my phone. And I should note that in the spring, just this past year, UNH, University of New Hampshire, as a Microsoft Enterprise campus, provided campus access to Copilot, which does use ChatGPT 4. So, and I can tell you that the release of Copilot to the university in the middle of spring term, kind of sort of unannounced, kind of suddenly, did create some controversy. Also, as part of my work, I have been doing some hands-on work, both through genealogy and otherwise, to introduce me to some prompt engineering. So the courses from the genealogy group that I took from Steve Little, he has a mnemonic device for thinking about prompting that recommends providing the interface with a role, a goal, a text, a task, and a flask. So note that these are very specific, they're very action oriented. And I'll note that by providing the AI tool with a text, a document or an image, and working with that specifically, you help to reduce the hallucinations and misinformation that can be made up in some of these bots. And the flask is simply the container or the form of the output that you're asking the tool to create, whether that's a short paragraph or a bulleted list, a table, computer coding, or an image. So compare this to Dr. Leo S. Lowe's clear framework prompt engineering that he has presented in several library-specific venues recently. He recommends that our prompts be concise, logical, explicit, adaptive, and reflective. Now, to me, these are a little bit more abstract than Steve Little's, and I've been using these as a combination of both of these strategies when I've been working with AI. And you will also likely have seen and perhaps even have taken, as I have, ACRL's Prompt Engineering for Librarians course, which also recommends this clear framework. So what's it like on campus? Well, the AI conversation at the University of New Hampshire has been a little bit more contentious. This is an illustration of what might be considered a contentious faculty meeting. And I heard about such a meeting from one of the faculty members that I support. She said that department conversations have been quite fraught in her department, and one faculty member actually shouted, "AI is nothing but a plagiarism machine." And I will admit there hasn't been much concentrated faculty support, I'll say yet, for thinking about this seemingly sudden appearance of a technology that appears to be very disruptive to teaching practices. And yet it also seems that this attitude is something that we've heard about before. New technologies often face skepticism. I was in graduate school in the 1990s when the internet became more publicly available, and this too caused a lot of distress. Wikipedia was launched 20 years ago, and I still have faculty members on our campus who don't allow me to mention it in classes because anyone can edit Wikipedia, even though the library hosts regular Wikipedia edit-a-thons, and we know there's a back-end structure and editorial practice now with Wikipedia. Sometimes old ideas are hard to put down. So this in many ways feels similar to earlier responses where the hand went up and banned or forbid a technology in its infancy and never looked at it again. And this would seem to be very detrimental to humanities fields, which are already under pressure from a variety of forces. But I do want to be empathetic. Absolutely, faculty fears and anxieties are understandable, given the rapid changes that AI has initiated. This is an unknown technology, and some of the experts in the field aren't even sure how it works. This engenders a lot of individual suspicion, and unfortunately, faculty members' suspicion often gets projected onto our students. Suddenly, everyone is suspected of being a cheater and plagiarizing. There are concerns around hallucinations, the made-up information, the fake news that chatbots can return in trying to be nice and helpful for us. And it is true that if AI is going to initiate changes in our pedagogy, changes in pedagogy takes time, and that creates fear and anxiety. Experimentation on our own takes time also. If you combine all of these with the absolutely legitimate ethical concerns, we'll talk about a little bit, and you may have heard about earlier in the conference, and the fact that all of this is going to make us need to put into place some guardrails and restrictions, rules for how to use AR in our courses, it's completely understandable that faculty members are concerned. At the same time, it's important to approach AI with a balanced perspective, recognizing both its potential and its limitations. So how do we move forward in this environment? And I would say we move forward the same way we always work with our faculty members. First, work with your champions. And under these circumstances, it might be best to work with individuals and instead of trying to work with groups all at once. I wouldn't want to try to be the librarian in the departmental faculty meeting talking about AI right now, but I might knock on a couple of individual doors. I would also recommend starting small. You don't have to change your whole course all at once. Look for low stakes opportunities to experiment with AI in ways that won't break the bank. Think about finding ways to make some work more efficient. Think about saving 6 minutes. You could save 6 minutes today on a task, 6 minutes tomorrow on a task. By the end of the week, you'd save up a little bit of a chunk of time. And over time, you might find that that expands. Students are eager to participate and use this technology and to discuss issues surrounding it. To forbid a technology just draws attention and interest. Students are relieved to be given the opportunity to work and discuss these tools in legitimate ways, and that engagement builds trust. Faculty and students together can start to build class rules around guardrails, permitted uses, and restrictions, and acknowledging these challenges, again, helps build community. So with that background, let's look briefly at some of the ways I've been unveiling AI to faculty in the arts and humanities disciplines that I support. AI can be used as a research assistant, a summarizer or text expander, a text transformer in many ways, a data extractor, a tech support specialist, a visual illustrator, and a writing assistant. So I'm going to talk about each of these briefly. As a research assistant, AI can assist in research by summarizing events, providing historical context, and breaking down complex topics. For instance, it can summarize the 2009 attack on the Dutch royal family or explain colonial New Hampshire divorce laws. But it is important to be the human in the loop. AIs do have a training data window, a cutoff date. ChatGPT-4's is October 2023. So if you're doing anything that's more current, make sure you have a tool that is connected in real time with the internet. Perplexity might be a tool of note here. If you're looking for a summarizer or an expander, I have people who say this is revolutionizing the way they're using texts. AI can summarize class transcripts and highlight key points, for example. What a nice takeaway. AI can also expand notes from a bulleted list or an outline and create quiz questions or flashcards. Now, the question becomes, when you're talking with faculty about this, AI can also summarize articles for inclusion in an annotated bibliography. And for some, we might need to talk through some of the ethical implications of this. Some tools do not retain texts over time. You're not building that into a corpus. Many of these AI sessions are session-oriented, so it's not being kept in real time. But you need to understand your AI's tools and privacy and confidentiality policies. And as time moves forward, I think a lot of these ethical quandaries will be worked out. But it's early days. As a text transformer, AI can, robust jargon that a lot of our students struggle to understand, and transform text to suit different audiences. AI can translate between languages. It can highlight different author styles, but I put question marks here because depending on the field, faculty may have more concerns about this. Those who teach in the language may be particularly concerned about AI's ability to translate from one language to another. Completely understandable. Those who teach literature may be concerned about AI's ability to model an author's style. These would be talking points in any discussion about using AI in classes. AI can also transform texts between formats. Here I can give you a little bit of an example. Here's an example of a legal document, a deed, transformed from a JPEG image to an OCR transcribed text using AI to make it more understandable. This is technology that can be particularly useful in fields like law and history. Transcribing a text in this way saves time, and students can begin working immediately with the content. Let's continue. As a data extractor, AI can extract data from complex documents, reducing errors and saving time. If you actually feed AI the text you want it to work with, that again can help reduce hallucinations. Here's an example. Taking the legal document, the deed I just showed you, and then the transcript of that, extract all of the proper names from this document and output the result as a table with headings appropriate to their roles. I didn't even have to say what the roles were. And ChatGPT gave me this table. I did have to have it re-render because some of those names, Darius and Abizar in particular, were tricky. So I had AI re-render that, but I left in the error at the end. So AI can give me a table, nicely formatted, grantor name, grantee name, the witnesses, the justice of the peace. But ChatGPT labeled the registrar of the deed as the register of the deed. Okay, I recognize that, and that's a quick change for me to make. Re-rendering to make the names correct, I can change register to registrar, and that's still saving me how many minutes by not having to create that table by hand and fill in all the blanks. That's saving me time. And that can be really powerful and can be really interesting when you think about what you can do in different contexts with texts that you feed into ChatGPT to extract some of this data from. Let's talk about AI as a tech support specialist. There are lots of different ways that AI can help when you're stuck working with a particular tool. I've used this as recently as this week to get help with Microsoft Office Word formatting, PowerPoint tricks. Think about what you can do with screen capture for your tutorials, when you have questions about Slack, how to make your social media posts more engaging. There are all kinds of ways that AI can help with this. And if we incorporate that into our teaching and classes, that too can be really powerful. You've already seen examples of my use of AI as a visual illustrator. AI tools can generate visuals. And what's interesting is it will reiterate with each prompt. And this concept can be particularly useful in history and English classes to provide illustrations to convey ideas. We do want to talk about the ethical considerations with regard to asking AI to make an image in the style of someone else. Many tools already restrict this. As a test, I tried to create an image in ChatGPT this week in the style of Picasso. I named Picasso specifically. And ChatGPT shut me down entirely and only was able to provide a generic image that could only vaguely be deemed to be inspired by Cubism. Nevertheless, outside of art and art history, where this might be more controversial, experimenting with AI-generated images is a terrific way to experience the iterative nature of generative AI, the back and forth. In that editing an image often means entirely re-rendering the thing, which may mean you have previous images that you like better than any current image. I mean, unless you're using something fancy like Midjourney or something that you're paying for. But it does help immediately demonstrate the power of prompt engineering and being iterative with a tool. And as one more illustration example, here's a prompt. Create the image of a collage of photographs of a family across several generations, set in a rural environment with a farmhouse, barn, a 1930 style car, another in 1950 style, and another similar to a Polaroid photograph in the 1960s. That was my initial kind of ballpark prompt. And I got this image. And for my purposes for demonstration this week, I thought this was fine. Does it catch all of the nuance of the prompt? Not quite, but I didn't re-render this multiple times either. I liked that it did show a family across several generations, a couple of old style cars, a rural background, barn, etc. And I could have tweaked my prompt and reiterated this a few times to see if I could get something better if I needed to. But it is a nice way to illustrate some of the concepts we might be talking about in class. Now let's move on to writing assistant. This one certainly has been controversial, in particular among the English faculty and the composition instructors. And it has caused a lot of stress and consternation. I do think that there are a number of ways that faculty can continue to teach composition using AI as an assistant, but which strategies will be adopted are yet to be determined. But think about using AI to create a draft based on some prompts. Maybe we go back as students and edit that draft in different colors. Maybe we talk about prompt engineering, compare and contrast prompts. Maybe we add citations to drafts and really go through and annotate our writing with citations. Maybe we use it really as a writing assistant that you could use in other fields as well. Upload your draft of a text and say, suggest 3 ways to make this better, to make this clearer, to make this more persuasive. Or certainly any of these things, you'll want to have a conversation to discuss the ethics and the boundaries and the expectations. This is a challenge and it will be disruptive, but I think we'll all eventually be creative and find ways to move through this. And then there are the ethical considerations. If you watched R.J. Romanowski's presentation yesterday, you know that there are a variety of ethical issues associated with AI. For faculty in the arts and humanities fields, the list tends to be centered around the following: misinformation and hallucinations, issues of bias, issues of copyright, authorship, and plagiarism, which brings up the whole concept of tool assistance in general, and the issue of data privacy. So we need to be prepared and willing to wrestle with these questions as librarians ourselves and as faculty, instructors in classrooms. But the students can also participate in these conversations, and I think if we engage them, these conversations will be richer. And now let me tell you about 2 classes that experimented with AI this past spring semester. So the first was one of our English 401 classes. This is our first-year composition class. So these are first-year students taught by a seasoned lecturer who has her students create rich text projects, such as videos, podcasts, and animated presentations based on research. And this semester, her class was working with the theme news and collective memory. And I have to say, the image here came out strangely close to the way Professor Jackson actually looks. And I shared this image with her this week as well. It was kind of funny. But she allowed her students to use AI to summarize articles for their annotated bibliography. This wasn't a major part of the assignment because the assignment was, again, to produce something beyond the text. But she did allow them to use AI to summarize the article itself. The students then moved forward to talk about how they thought they could use that particular article in their research to further their projects. And then she also did allow them to use AI for technology support because a lot of them are using platforms that they may not be familiar with. She did say that she got many fewer tech support questions this time around, which was great. And she said the students reported back that being allowed to experiment with these tools was very exciting because all they had been really told about before was not to use them. So the fact that they could ask questions and experiment openly really meant a lot to them. So that was exciting. And the professor actually said that the students' citation work was better this year than she'd noticed. And I don't know if there's a connection there with AI or not. Maybe there was more bandwidth this year to think about citations since some of these other things were helped with AI. But I thought that was really interesting that she noted that as well. And the second class was a history 797 class, so an upper level class. It's actually our senior capstone class. And students were allowed to use AI to, again, extract data from primary sources and format that into tables, which would be one way of demonstrating AI's potential in advanced research. Now, I acknowledge that this is a much more limited use of generative AI, but still one that allowed both the faculty member and the students to experiment and iterate with prompts. Again, the students reported back that being allowed to experiment with these tools was like being allowed to taste forbidden fruit, even as they believe that they will be asked to use AI with some skill in their future careers. Just two that I know of in the arts and humanities that were experimenting with AI this past spring semester. There's still a long way to go toward adopting the use of generative AI in the humanities at the University of New Hampshire, but it is a start. So some tips and reminders. Remember that this is the worst AI we'll ever use. Things continue to move forward and the landscape is changing daily. AI was not designed to replace Google. We shouldn't be thinking of using AI the way we use Google as a search engine. It may have the capability of going out on the web and bringing back information, but the real power is in using AI to feed into text and to extract data, to summarize data, to use AI with textual documents the way spreadsheets revolutionized the way folks worked with numbers. AI is not one and done. Chat with your chat bot. Continue to reiterate. Ask it questions. Have it ask you questions. You've probably seen some examples of this already in the conference this week. I'm sure we'll see more tomorrow as well. Play with the AI tools. 10 hours in a tool can make you feel quite comfortable as far as what it's doing and what it can do. So play a little bit. And then expand to other tools to compare strengths and weaknesses. Out of habit, I'm right now using ChatGPT. I've heard Claude is even better with some textual work. I haven't been experimenting with that quite enough. We do have Copilot now on campus, and I've played with that a little bit, but I haven't been as impressed with its results at the moment. That could change tomorrow. A couple more. You're the human in the loop. Make sure you're using your critical thinking skills to always evaluate the kinds of things that are coming back through those chat prompts. Look for small ways to save time. Start small. You can start to automate some tasks or experiment with drafting some things, emails, lesson plans. You'll find other ways to save time and other things that the AI can do. And remember, we are still in early days. We're still working through use cases and ethical considerations, and I do think that this will continue to evolve and we'll continue to pay attention to some of these concerns. Work with your champions. If there's someone that you've been working with for years, that's the person whose door I'd knock on and say, hey, how's the department conversation around AI? Do you want to do something specific? Is that going to get you in trouble with your colleagues, or is that something we can play with a little bit in the fall? I've already started some conversations in the summer with folks who are starting to course plan for fall around maybe incorporating something with AI. So I do have a list of resources here at the back of my slide deck, and I will happily share my slides. I have been following Ethan Mollick's One Useful Thing blog, and I have read his book called Co-Intelligence as well, which is very readable and a great introduction to some of these issues surrounding AI. Nicole Henning, one of our librarian colleagues in the world out in Arizona, is also doing terrific work. And I have linked to Stephen Little's description of the Empowering Genealogists with Artificial Intelligence class, and with Dr. Leo Lowe's presentation on clearer dialogues with AI, unpacking prompt engineering for librarians, if you'd like to see that. And at that point, I'm happy to stop sharing and answer some questions if anyone has some. Thank you for sharing your time with me today.
Thank you so much, Katherine. That was wonderful. All right, please feel free to share your questions. You can type in the chat or the Q&A feature. You can also raise your hand and I can unmute you if you'd like to ask a question aloud. Getting lots of applause, and Emily says, excellent presentation. Thank you.
Think of what we'll be able to do when we gather all of the information that we've been learning this week about generative AI to bring back to our colleagues, both in the library and across campus this fall. It's going to be really exciting.
Yes, it's been so much this week to synthesize and bring together. All right, let's see. We've got a question. Does UNH have a generative AI policy? If so, what are your thoughts about it?
There was an initial knee-jerk reaction from the administration really early on in 2023 that said, don't use it. And then, of course, had to be moderated and pulled back a little bit. We're now, we have a choice of several different boilerplate bits of language to put into syllabi, depending on how much AI is allowed to use in a particular class. It's up to the professor's discretion. Unfortunately, it feels that that's really siloing. You know, it kind of puts everybody in their own sort of place. I'm sad to say that our Center for Teaching and Learning was cut in a recent, I know, what the wrong time for that, right? In a recent budget shift. It's being restarted now, right now in the summer. And they're already planning some programming around using AI in teaching and learning for fall. It's coming in August. But unfortunately, we've had this little bit of a lag. And I think, again, that's really generated some anxiety because there hasn't been even an umbrella location where faculty can go and talk about teaching with AI in you know, learning-based ways. And so I think that has caused a stir as well. I hope that that will be fixed in the coming months.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah.
Let's see, Mandy asks, have you collaborated with any humanities faculty in terms of teaching students about generative AI?
So right now, I have been working with faculty in particular and sharing the information in more detail than I've been able to share with you in 45 minutes. And they've been taking that and using that in their classes. So it has been sort of a train the trainer sort of model. I haven't had an opportunity yet where it's been kind of free enough for me to come into a class and kind of do a lesson. I will say I had a conversation in a class generated by some student-led questions around the Copilot release that I mentioned in the spring. And everyone was very excited about that. And immediately, like, I had to show them all how to sign up for it. But because there hasn't been a lot of guidance for faculty, I don't really want to put my neck on the line out there in encouraging, like, I'm telling all your students to plagiarize. I think we're going to have to be a little careful right now as far as what we're doing under what circumstances, because I think, again, until there's a little bit more momentum as far as, oh, this is exciting and we can use this in legitimate ways and let's experiment with this. We don't want to, put the library on the line too much for opening the box of worms. So yeah, it's a little tricky.
Yeah, that's very understandable. Yeah, I feel very fortunate that the Center for Teaching and Learning on our campus gathered a group of faculty kind of ad hoc very early on and said, hey, let's talk about what our general attitude should be. Should it be a general attitude of avoid it, or a general attitude of learn about it and teach students what they need to know about strengths and weaknesses? And we all very much agreed on that latter point, that we have to address the reality that it's there and teach the students how to do it well. And so even though the campus doesn't really have a clear policy, that's been the prevailing attitude that's been put forth since early on.
I think that, and what I'm learning this week, which has been very affirming, is that I think a lot of us are in that same place, right? I think campuses are still trying to figure out how to work with this. And the trick is that with my faculty in the arts and humanities, they haven't been the group that are the early adopters typically, right? I mean, there are individuals, and those are the ones that I've got my eye on. Like, I know you had an iPhone early on, like, come and talk to me. But it really is a matter of seeking those folks out at this point. But I certainly do hope that by fall, we'll be able to have a group of faculty from across campus that talks about how people are doing it in different disciplines.
Yeah, excellent. So let's see, we've got one comment here saying, I'm a K-8 librarian and found this very helpful even for my students and faculty. So that's
Thank
great.
you.
Kathy asked, will the slides be shared?
Yes, I'm happy to share my slides, whichever way the conference is sharing them, or I can certainly make them available any other way.
All right, excellent. If you want to email them to me, I can attach them to this event in the Zoom event. And then I believe we'll also be creating more of a long-term archive after the conference.
Perfect. Yep.
All right. Any other final questions? Let's see. Oh, we've got a raised hand. Okay. All right, Atticus, you should be able to unmute yourself now and ask your question.
Hi there. So I work at a community college, and I have been teaching in classes with those I forget the term for the faculty, the early adopters faculty that you talked about, who are already integrating generative AI into their coursework. And kind of you've talked about siloing, and ESL's faculty obviously aren't as privy on adapting it for obvious reasons. Do you foresee that siloing continuing? You mentioned there's faculty that still won't even use Wikipedia. How do you reach those faculty that, like, I've been doing professional development stuff for faculty, teaching them about generative AI, but there is a subset of the faculty that haven't gone to any of my sessions and probably aren't going to. Do you have any pointers for reaching those faculty members?
Right. So I am working with a subset of faculty on campus. I have about 300 if we counted them all individually, and I'm certainly not trying to get everybody on board. My hope is that starting with the 2 folks that I worked with in the spring, that word of mouth is going to travel. They're going to talk to their department colleagues about what we did in class and how it didn't sink the boat, it didn't end the world. And that I do think there are others who I can, knock on their doors between now and September and say, aren't you curious? Don't you want to play a little bit? You want to experiment? And I think if I can talk to them individually in their own comfort zone, whether it's their office or by Zoom through, they know who I am. I think I'll be able to hook in a few more. And I think right now, because the technology is so new, I think that's enough. If we can just sort of seed the ground with folks who are willing to play and experiment, I think it's going to take off. It's going to take off. But I told you, I've got someone who I can't even talk to class about Wikipedia. And there are always going to be those folks. I got people who don't like ebooks. I mean, it's post-pandemic, folks. Come on. So, I think for some, we're just going to wait them out. And for some, I think they're going to get drawn in because they're going to be curious and be like, oh, I heard you do this cool thing in class. Can you show me how to do that? That's what I'm hoping for. That may
Yeah, I
not
love
be
your comment
automatic.
about them going back to their department, because I do think sometimes if they won't listen to us initially, they may be more receptive to word of mouth from their teaching peers.
Yeah.
So let's see, Joseph asks, does this make anyone wonder about how closely the trajectory of generative AI acceptance will correlate with acceptance of distance education?
Interesting question.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did distance education instruction for a time, and then it just sort of became instruction. So it'll be interesting to see what those correlations are. Let's keep track of that.
Let's see. Kristen asks, what is the faculty AI interaction task that you have found the most leverage with? So is there a particular hook that's gotten them more?
So with the English instructor, it was really fun, again, to do some of the visual illustrations and to show what AI is doing and just kind of coming up with this thing and then saying, okay, remove the elephants and have it render and see what comes up and note that, oh, it changed the whole thing. It didn't just take the elephants out. Like doing that is immediate gratification because you see the impact initially and it's very visually stimulating. And that can be a really good hook for demonstration. Another good one is to ask it to tell like a story about local history in your particular area. So I'm a Maine native. So it was like, hey, tell me a story about a moose on the mountain in Maine. And AI will give you a story about a moose on a mountain in Maine like that. And it's really kind of fun for people to say, oh, wow, look at it do that thing. It's fast. Oh, it's pretty comprehensive. Oh, that's very interesting. And then iterate a little bit like, oh, include Little Red Riding Hood in it. And it'll reiterate and like do cool things like that. Or, make it talking pirate to you. I mean, it's just ridiculous, the fun things you can come up with. And so, just think about wacky things, experiment yourself so that you can find those hooks that you can use in classes or in conversations with faculty.
Yes, excellent. All right, well, I believe we are at time. So everyone just please join me in thanking Katherine. This was an excellent presentation. And I believe our sessions are done for today, but we hope we'll have a lot of you back for the last day of Gale tomorrow.
See y'all tomorrow.
All right,
Thanks, Erin.
thanks.